I guess we're going to have to make our own equipment.
It was kind of like an ideal situation because they started naked and they could just find out what the hell would make a terrific shop. Paul is a very inventive man. He's like a Hoosier inventor. He was really interested in figuring out a whole new kind of wheel, new kinds of kilns, new ways of using wheels. So Paul brought an enormous amount of that kind of evangelism into the shop.
This is like a vacuum and a magnet. He knows right where to go to pick up these things. He's got an uncanny sense of direction. Thank God for him, because I used to get lost just driving to school.
Usually when you go to school, everything works. Everything is provided. This was totally opposite. We had to buy our own clay from commercial sources. And we heard that you could use a bread dough mixer to mix clay, and I eventually went out and found one on the market in a restaurant supply house, an old used one. And that was a breakthrough for us because now we could mix lots of clay at will. We could change the composition, and each person could tailor the clay to their needs.
It wasn't like in a school where you get 25 pounds a semester of clay, in a little garbage can, you locked it up. We had piles of clay out there, and this is it. This was your stuff. This is your material. You're going to start there. And I don't give a damn what you do as long as it works for you, you know. I was loosening up like hell myself. You know, I was breaking through traditions of what was good design, what a vessel should be, and all that sort of thing. And I got to the point where I couldn't care diddly squat about that anymore.
I said, okay, I'm in your class, Pete. And he said, okay, there's the clay, there's the wheel. And that's the only instruction he ever gave me. And that was all I needed. When you started working with Pete, you had a master potter working right beside you, and he was just like you. And you had to keep up or else. If you couldn't make it, that was your problem and not his. In fact, it was like not being in an academic situation. All of us were just working in the shop together. Voulkos never gave a formal lecture the whole time I was there. And he wouldn't even tell us how to make glazes.
We had 3 different kinds of glazes that had absolute, they were the dumbest glazes you ever saw or could think of. I mean, one was a shiny glaze, one was a matte glaze, one was a semi-matte, and one was just black. And I told my students that this is all the glazes that you're going to get. Now, if you want those pretty glazes, you go down to the glaze store and get them, but don't bring them in here, you know. You got 3 dumb glazes, there's a barrel of it here and this and here and here. And you're going to put it on these dumb forms. And you're going to take a dumb shape, whatever you got going there, and you got 4 dumb glazes there. And if you could make something aesthetic out of that, you're going to get an A.
You could set your own course in that kind of a situation. And right there beside you, you had an example of a man who was setting his own course, who was giving up slick wear and suddenly tearing his clay apart.
Having become a master over clay, Voulkos could let the material go free. In the process, he pulled clay out of its confines as craft and into an art.
What you've got to remember is this. Ceramics were not part of what was called modern art. They were relegated to craft. It did not belong within the tradition of high art. So, the problem for these ceramicists on the West Coast was how to break through this barrier. It was a puzzle for them how to proceed. How do you find what you are seeking? This is the struggle these ceramicists had to go through. One of the first things that Voulkos appreciated in order to make his move was to get rid of function.
like many people, I was first astounded. I was confused and couldn't really distinguish what it was I was confused by.
His technical ability was so great that even the craftsman couldn't overlook that he was a major force. And he really did innovate a lot of things. He might have acted like it was nothing, but he innovated everything. His glazes, everything, were major innovations, and his firing techniques were innovations, and the kills were innovations, and the physical condition that he was in was a major innovation. I think the thing that he brought to ceramics was something was never there before, which was a physicality, the matter of fact that he wasn't going around in his little Sahara boots and having tea, which was the scenario of ceramicists. It was heavy in tea time. He was a black coffee, work boot, strong man. And anybody that hung out with him had to keep up.
He was not going to make decorative cups and saucers, objects to be used with flowers put in them. Instead of putting refined glazes, chemical glazes on, he would color with epoxy paints on top of the finished products. Instead of making it refined and beautiful, he took the clay and he savaged the clay. He attacked it, he punched it, he impacted it. If it broke, he went and got epoxy and glued it together again.
He made an enormous break into violent personal expression. In half a dozen works, Voulkos matched totally all of the work that had been done in the world.
Fusing the earthy perfection of ancient Greece with the water and wind of Japan, Voulkos transformed his vessel forms into containers of human expression. The scale and volume of Voulkos's work was unprecedented, the search for new form relentless. Inspired as much by Picasso as Pollock, as much by Charlie Parker as Segovia, Voulkos himself became artist and merged painting, sculpture, and clay into one.
Voulkos had tremendous difficulty in getting his work accepted by the critical establishment, art establishment. He had an exhibition, he was invited to an exhibition at the Museum of Modern Art, and that should have been the crowning moment of the beginning of his acceptance. When in fact the exhibition took place, it took place in the members' lounge of the Modern. So there were all the people sitting there having their lunch on their nice clean white platters with their nice white cups and their nice white bowls, and along the walls were Voulkos's lumpy, expressionistic pieces. So they were shown as a kind of decorative adjunct, not in the galleries of the Museum of Modern Art with the famous artists of the world. So it was a bitter frustration and disappointment for him.
I think resistance is, at least to me, is a very motivating kind of thing. If people resist what I'm doing, I just dwell on that stuff. You know, I said, this guy isn't getting it, you know, and he resists it, and that's all well and good to me, because I don't expect to be understood at that kind of level where it's being resisted. You know, the resistance comes on quite a ways down the aesthetic ladder, let's put it that way.
They refused to accept that ceramics could be art. They thought it was a craft. Pete stepped over that and jumped from Cruets to Picasso.
In time, a number of people began to understand and see that Voulkos was a remarkable artist, and his reputation spread among the cognoscenti, among those who understood ceramics. There was a very famous painter, Sam Francis, and he happened to marry a Japanese woman. And when he went to Japan, he went to one of the greatest living masters of ceramics in Japan and said, "Will you teach me to make ceramics?" And the master said to him, "But aren't you from California?" He said, "Yes." He said, "No, I can't teach you to make ceramics. You must go back to California. There is a great master there, an American. You are an American. You must go to him, Peter Voulkos."
I was looking for school to attend in Los Angeles, and I stopped in at Otis, and I didn't know who Voulkos was, actually. But when I told him I was looking for a school, then much to my surprise, he said, "Well, we'll have to get you a car and a place to live in Echo Park." And, you know, after a person says something like that, I couldn't just walk away and not commit myself. So I came to Otis.
Everybody that became involved with Peter Voulkos became very different. Each of these people became entirely different than the other. They discarded the conventions and created their own conventions for their work.
You know, I hadn't had much teaching, but I knew enough about freedom to leave people's asses alone, you know, and let them develop, but put them in a situation where it can happen. This is the way I conducted my classes. They're freewheeling classes. I just put out clay there, and a lot of good things happened.
The classes were pretty free. There was no traditional type class. Voulkos actually never taught. He somehow set up an environment where people were inspired to do their thing.
I wasn't one with a syllabus. It was up there. Today we're going to do this and this and this. So I was trying to build sort of a milieu there where there was this energy that could happen between people and they could feed on each other. So anybody who didn't fit into that whole milieu was out.
So it was not comfortable because you were always going in an area that you just didn't know what was happening or what you were doing. It was a kind of art that had no tradition stuck to it. You just went forward and you did your thing.
He was really thinking about making an advance for himself in the world of form and structure and finding new ways to use clay and all these kinds of things. And when you're in that kind of a thing, you can't help but react.
You have to remember that of this group of people clustered around Voulkos, each of them was searching for their own way. Each artist is quite different. These are Westerners, and these are men trying to be their own men.
There was something that happened at that school that was an us against them situation. It was us against the craftsmen, and us being basically a misogynist group trying to be the biggest gorillas in the world.
And at night is when most of the work, I think, was done. Everybody worked independently, not in the same room, but somehow had drifted apart and worked in their own area.
Voulkos, more often than not, would come in around 9, and it was not unusual to gobble up 2 tons of clay at night. Then we'd stagger off and have breakfast.